Hi everybody, it's Keren here from TuppenceColoured.co.uk and thank you very much for joining me today. Today is something a little bit different. I haven't got a project for you today. I thought we would go back to the very basics of stamping and talk about ink. So I'm aiming this video, my target audience for this particular tutorial are people who are maybe just starting off in stamping, or people who have been stamping for a while but still get confused about the different varieties and kinds of ink that are available. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. If you were looking for a project, sorry, not doing one today, but come back and see me again sometime soon, and I will be back to my usual project-based videos. Okay, are you still with me? Right, then I'm going to assume that that means that you want to know something about the different kinds of varieties and ink that are available. So when I first started off stamping, I saw Dawn Bibby on shopping television, and she was doing all these wonderful things with stamps and inks and embossing powders, and I thought, wow, I really want to have a go at that. And I've actually still got the first stamps that I bought from QVC, from Dawn Bibby, back in those days. They're in a drawer in my bedroom. But then I went out and I got some magazines, and the magazines talked about dye-based inks and pigment-based inks and solvent-based inks, and I was just a beginner, didn't have all that much money. I mean, I've got a massive craft stash now, but that has been built up over quite a few years, and it was like, well, what do I do? What's the best ink for me to begin with? What do I want to do with it? So I started off, and the first kinds of ink that I bought were inks like this. This is Stampin Up's Whisper White. It's a pigment ink, and I've got some other pigment inks here. Okay, so I've got some metallic inks. Now, a pigment ink is, generally speaking, it's water-based. Which means that you clean it up with a water-based product, baby wipes, Stampin' Mist, something like that. But what it is a solution of something quite sticky. It's usually glycerine-based, and you have fragments of pigment powder ground up very fine and suspended in the ink. So that is why you can have metallics in a pigment-based ink, because they're opaque, right? You can't see through them. And if I just I've got one of my stamps, actually I'm going to use this one. It's a snowflake stamp here. I've got a scrap of dark card. I'm just going to ink up my stamp. Now, the technique that I learned was to take the stamp to the pad and lots of light tapping. So that's the way I do it. Okay, and as you can see that, you can see that stamp on the dark ink. So let me wipe this and put a different colour on. Where's my towel gone? Misty, are you sitting on my towel? Oh, here it is. So I'm just going to give that a wipe. Okay. Actually, I'm going to give it a little spray with some Stampin' Mist. Stay there, boy. Stampin' Mist. Clean it off. And let's have the silver metallic ink, because I think that's going to look pretty. And Stampin' Up used to sell the Encore metallics. We don't anymore. They're not in the catalogue anymore, which I think is a pity, because I really like using them. And yeah, you can really see that that has got a nice metallic sheen to it, and that is because it is a pigment-based ink. So I'm just going to put my spritz and clean it up. That's just slid off. That's just slid off my clear block. So I'm just going to pop it back on. Okay. So you were pigment-based inks, so they're opaque, so they can go onto dark card. And the other thing about them, which I'm not going to demonstrate here today because I'm talking about inks, not embossing powders, but they are slow drying. So because they are slow drying, they will retain they will retain things like embossing powder put onto them. So that's a good thing to remember. Another ink that will retain embossing powder, that's a sticky ink, is either an clear embossing pad, so a clear embossing ink, or a Versamark. And Versamark is a clear watermark ink, and I don't know how well you can see the effect on there. Looks best after it's had some time to dry. Now I could stamp all over my card and I could leave it dry, and that would give it a very subtle watermarked effect. There, you can just about see it there. Yeah. Or I could use it for heat embossing. So I could sprinkle my embossing powder onto that, heat it up with my heat gun, and I would have a nice stamped image. Okay. So that's one kind of ink, one variety of ink. The other kind that you will come across, one of the other kinds that you'll come across, are the dye-based inks. Now, the ink in dye-based is based on a dye, specialised subject, glaringly obvious, which means that it's transparent. And if I can show you on my dark card again, let me get my stamp. This time I've got a little sprig of holly. And these stamps I'm using today are from the Spirited Snowman set, which is just about to retire. Now if I press that down onto my dark coloured card, it just looks black. Okay, you can see that there's a stamp there, but basically you can't really see what colour it is, and that is because the ink is clear, it is see-through. If I bring in a bit of white card, on the other hand, press that down, now you can see that that is shaded spruce, that is a green coloured ink, and it comes dye-based inks. The colours very vivid, very bright, and because it's just a liquid, you tend to get a clearer line with a dye-based ink. So if you're stamping something that's got a lot of very fine detail onto it, you know, a lot of very fine shading, then you're definitely better off going for a dye-based ink, because you can get a finer impression. Because the pigment based has got little particles of pigment ground up in it, it can kind of, just trying to think of the word, it can obscure the lines a little bit. Okay, alright, so that's that colour. Another one that we sell in Stampin' Up is the Memento, and again this is a dye-based ink, but it is dye-based and water-based. Okay, and that's going to become apparent, the difference is going to become apparent in a moment. Alright, so I'm going to concentrate on this one, which is my black one. So those are the water-based inks. There are also solvent and oil-based inks out there. So I have some Stays On Jet Black, which is a solvent-based ink, and this has a very hard felt pad. So I'm just going to rub it onto my stamp, and I could also probably do with a little bit of re-inker on this. It's getting a little bit dry, so I'm going to give it quite a bit of ink. Now, yeah, as you can see, now that's because I haven't got enough ink on there. It's not the way that the Stays On should be. All right, so Stays On, you can stamp onto paper with it. It has one of these things in the lid of the pad, and you need to keep that with your ink pad. Don't throw it away. All right, this is called a vapor barrier, and what it does is it tries to slow down the rate at which the ink pad will dry out. And yeah, the other thing about stamps is that I always get my fingers filthy when I'm using them. Now, to clean a pad from Stays On, after you've used Stays On, you do need a specialist cleaner. Water won't work because it is a waterproof ink. Okay, but that means that you can use Stays On to stamp onto non-absorbent surfaces and slick surfaces. So you can use Stays On to stamp onto plastic. It can stamp onto glass. It can stamp onto stone, china, all sorts of things, and it won't wash off. If you need to take it off, you have to use the specialist cleaner. Okay, which I'm going to rub onto my fingers as well because I got some Stays On my fingers. Okay, and Stampin' Mist also on my fingers. Just take that off. Okay, I'm using Stampin' Mist for speed. I also have one of these guys. This is a Simply Chamois. Don't know what it's made out of. It could be magic. So if I need to clean a water-based stamp, I just wipe it. It's a moist kind of sponge. If you leave it alone, it will dry out, and it goes brick hard, and all you have to do then is pour some more water onto it and it revives it. As you can see, it absorbs the ink, and it gets to look pretty grimy and pretty grubby, but that is fine. It's, what did somebody say? They're tools, not jewels, and this is a tool. So as long as it's absorbing the ink and the ink is not coming back out, it is fine. You can throw it in the washing machine and you know, revive it every now and again. I find that the Stampin' dye-based inks, actually I'm going to use that to give that a little bit of a clean. There you go. That ink comes out pretty well if I put it in the washing machine. The Memento, for some reason, doesn't. It stays there. So as you can see all of the stamps, or quite a few of the stamps that I've been using. Doesn't matter, still works fine. I'm happy with it. Okay, so we've got the water-based Memento. We have used the solvent-based Stays On. There's one further kind of ink, which Stampin' Up used to sell archival ink pads. We don't anymore. We've taken them out of the range. Now, archival inks are either solvent or sometimes oil-based. And the reason why they're called archival is they're waterproof, for one thing. And they are also designed to not to fade. So the colours will last a long time. Okay, and that one is actually basic grey. I have a basic black one somewhere, which I didn't retire when these retired, and I didn't retire my basic grey either because I don't use it all that much. But sometimes I want an archival ink. Okay, so again, just going to clean that off. And I usually clean my stamps at the end of a stamping session. I'm just, you know, doing it after every one today just to show you. All right. Okay, so here's what I have now. I have an image that I've stamped in Shaded Spruce, and this one is in Tuxedo Black Memento. This one is Stays On, and this one is archival. Right, so why does it even matter? What's the difference? Well, the difference is first of all, what are you going to do with it? So if you are going to be heat embossing, then you need something that is going to dry slowly, like my Versamark or one of the pigment-based inks that I've got over here. But if you're going to be doing any colouring in of these stamps, you need to know what kind of ink you've been using to stamp your image, because if you've stamped your image in a solvent-based ink, then you need to colour in with a water-based marker. If you've stamped with a water-based ink, then you need to colour in with a solvent-based marker. So solvent-based marker would be something like your Stampin' Blends, or your Sharpie, or your Copics, or your Spectrum Noirs, those kinds of stamps. So you use opposites. If I were to put one of my Stampin' Write markers on top of a water-based image, then I run the risk of actually kind of blurring that lines, and that's fine here because I'm going green on green. Yeah, but if I was to put, say, lovely lipstick, I might blur that line. All right, so since I've got my Stampin' Write markers, now the Stampin' Write markers have the exact same ink as our Stampin' pads. Okay, so if these ever dry up, I can refill these with the same ink that I would use to re-ink my stamp pad, which I think is really, really cool. So now that was my memento. So I'm going to use these on the ones that I did with Stays On, and I can scribble right over the top, just like that, and the same thing on my archival, right over the top, and the ink stays put. I wouldn't want to do that with my water-based marker, so I'm being very, very careful how I colour this one in. Okay, for this one, just scribble over the top, everything's fine. Alright, now this one is the one that I stamped in Tuxedo Black. Brain is not working today, so I have my Stampin' Blends here. I'm going to pick out some colours to go nicely on this one. So what's this? What have I got here? Dark Poppy Parade, that sounds good. And sorry for the rattling. One of these days I'm going to treat myself to a proper case for these. But at the moment, I'm still completing my collection. Okay. Okay, so Stampin' Blends. These are alcohol based, and they have two kinds of tip to them. So they have the kind of firmer bullet nib on that end, and this end is a brush nib. And again, I'm quite confident in colouring over the Memento ink because it is water-based and these are alcohol markers. And they are absolutely lovely. They are great craft pens. Now, if you are, somebody who really, really likes colouring, then you've probably invested in all of your Copics, or your high-end alcohol markers, and you know what? You enjoy, okay? Because they will have qualities that are perfect for you. But I'm not really that much of a colourer-innerer. I'm more of a paper crafter, and these work absolutely fine for me. Okay, so that is it. That is my Stampin' Basics, basics of ink pads, and yeah, short and sweet today. We'll be back to normal in the next video. Hope that you've enjoyed it. If you do, give me, click that like button, give me a thumbs up, and come back and see me again sometime soon. But for now, thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you in the near future. Bye bye.